Hello and welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Tyler, and today, with no real news to talk about, what I want to do is kind of just catch everybody up on what the entire AL East has done this offseason. We've got about a month until spring training starts. Yes, there is some time for some deals to get done, and most likely some deals will get done. Eli kind of laid out recently that the Orioles are probably done, although that's not necessarily true. We pretty much know the Blue Jays are going to do more. They're trying to do more, but I think we're at a point in the offseason where a lot of the biggest moves have happened, and I do feel like the at least structure of the AL East specifically has kind of been established. So it felt like a good time to pause, reflect on the last 3 months, potentially prognosticate a little bit on the next month to 2 months, and kind of just give everybody up to date on what's going on. Because I know for me personally, I get very Orioles focused and kind of forget or ignore what the other teams in the division are doing. Maybe you're not like that. Maybe you're a total sicko that is refreshing MLB trade rumors every 10 seconds and you know exactly what's going on. But I feel like most people are a little closer to myself. So that's what we're going to do on this episode. Just a little housekeeping. Of course, we are part of the Believe Podcast Network. Head over to believe.com, BLEAV.com to check out our shows as well as others. We really appreciate the support that Believe has given us the last year. It's helped us kind of keep the show going a little bit. And of course, they've hooked us up with some sponsors such as Bet Online, who is also sponsoring this episode of the Warehouse Podcast. And let's just remember, Bet Online, they continue to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. And whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. They have the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, even the NHL and UFC. Bet Online is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. So head over to betonline.com, or I'm sorry, BetOnline right now. I think it's betonline.ag to get involved. BetOnline, the game starts here. Thanks to BetOnline for the support. So what we're going to do, and just to be transparent, I'm on a bit of a shot clock today. I got to get this going. So hopefully it's only a 25, 30-minute episode. Not going to get to spend a ton of time on every single team. But what I would want to do is kind of go through the teams, starting with the Orioles and then going through the standings, just catch up on things. And then at the end, sort of reflect on where I feel like the Orioles are in the pecking order at this point, because I feel like there's been a lot of hype around the Yankees, around the Red Sox, and deservedly so. But do I feel like that has necessarily changed, where the Orioles sit right now? We'll get into that. So reviewing where the teams finished last year, the Yankees won the division with 94 wins, Orioles in second place with 91, Red Sox in third with 81, Rays in fourth with 80, and then the Blue Jays bringing up the rear with 74 wins. So to remind everybody what the Orioles have done this offseason, I think that's pretty easy for us to remember here. If you're listening to this podcast, you're a big O's fan, you probably know, but let's just remind folks the big deals at least. And the source I'm using here as sort of a compilation is going to be Fangraph's roster resource tool. I mention it on pretty much every episode, but it's just that awesome. Go to fangraphs.com, look for roster resource in the upper bar, and find the Orioles or whatever team you want, and you can find all this information. And again, this is not sponsored by Fangraphs. They're just an awesome website, so check that out if you would like. But reminder what the Orioles have added: Andrew Kittredge, Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sagano, Gary Sanchez, and Tyler O'Neill. They've, of course, lost Corbin Burns, Anthony Santander. John Means is still out there. They didn't tender a contract to Danny Coulombe or Jacob Webb. Let's see, anything else that I'm forgetting? They haven't made any big trades really. They've added some guys on the peripheral of the roster. Anthony Santander is a free agent still. I think that's people are kind of floating the idea. I think wishing that he comes back on a one year deal to the Orioles. I don't expect that to happen, but that kind of catches you up. So what have the Orioles done? We've talked about it a lot. I think the rotation has regressed slightly. They've replaced Corbin Burns with Sagano and Morton essentially. They have gotten deeper. They are, of course, relying on hopefully Kyle Bradish to get healthy and to come back at some point in the season and maybe be that ace. And I think we need to remind ourselves that Mike Elias tends to view these seasons in stages. So just because the Orioles right now don't seem to have an ace on the staff doesn't tell me that he's done searching for an ace or a frontline starter, as he might call it. I expect the Orioles, if they are competent, if they are competitive in the first half of the season, for Elias to be aggressive at the deadline. He has shown, I think, these last 2, 3 seasons that he's willing to make the logical trades at the deadline. Zach Eflin last year was a big addition. Honestly, ended up being the best pitcher that was moved at the trade deadline last year. And the Orioles, I think, they certainly didn't perform better after the deadline, but in terms of the talent they had internally, it did get better. So I kind of expect Mike Elias to do something similar this year. And the offense is pretty much unchanged. They have all the stars are still there. They haven't made huge additions there. Pretty much swapped O'Neill in for Santander. I think if you look at the numbers, that's really not much of a loss. I think like Santander, the power was huge. The defense was a negative. His personality was a positive. But I think in terms of on-field performance and overall impact, the Orioles probably aren't getting any worse with O'Neill because it also sort of opens up at bats. I don't expect O'Neill to play every single game against a right-handed pitcher, especially better ones. I think that's going to be an opportunity for Heston Kjerstad to get in there and involved, and I think that potentially improves the offense as well. It diversifies it a little bit, strengthens it on a split basis. So I think are the Orioles better right now than they were at the end of last season? I would say probably not. In terms of talent added, no, they're probably slightly worse because you've lost Corbin Burns and not really replaced him. You've added depth, not necessarily top level quality. The offense is virtually the same. I think what I would say there is you hope they are taking steps forward in terms of development. You hope Gunnar Henderson can repeat what he did last year. You hope Adley Rutschman figures out what happened in the second half last year. You hope Jackson Holliday is much better this season. So I think the offense has a higher ceiling this year, but did they get necessarily better across the board? I don't think so, but they won 91 games last year. They made the playoffs. I think there's some reason to say that the second half of the season was a bit of an anomaly. They weren't a 500 team. They felt a little bit better than that. So I don't feel like the Orioles have changed a whole lot since the end of last season. So that's the Orioles. Let's talk about the Yankees. Of course, the big moves there. They've lost Juan Soto. They've added Paul Goldschmidt. They've added Max Fried in free agency. They've lost Clay Holmes in the bullpen. They've lost Gleyber Torres. Uh, Alex Verdugo's gone. Anthony Rizzo not picked up. So those are some of the bigger moves. Of course, on the trade market, they've added Devin Williams in the bullpen to essentially replace Clay Holmes and upgrade that position. They've added Cody Bellinger to essentially replace, not really replace Verdugo, really more replace Juan Soto, but it should allow them to move Aaron Judge back over to right field, which is huge. For them defensively, Bellinger's a better defensive outfielder, defensive center fielder than Judge is at this point. Judge is a very good defensive right fielder. Devin Williams, like I said, I think upgrades their bullpen. The rotation is probably better. Fried is kind of replacing Nestor Cortez, who was traded to the Brewers in the Devin Williams deal. So pitching wise, I think they are probably better. You feel like um, the top three of Cole, Fried, and oh God, now now the young pitcher is avoiding my memory, but that's the beauty of the roster resource tool on Fangraphs. You can look it up. Luis Heel, and then if Carlos Rodon is back to being himself, that's a really strong 1 through 4. Clark Schmidt has been good, has had some injury stuff. You think he could be good? Marcus Stroman, they're probably going to trade him. That's still kind of up in the air, but I think the Yankees, and this is not me having a hot take or anything. I think the Yankees feel better this year than they did last year. They certainly feel more well-rounded than they did last year. Um, Last year, their offense felt pretty easy to attack. Of course, they went to the World Series, so it's not like any team really figured them out except for the Dodgers. But it was really an Aaron Judge and Juan Soto led attack that essentially, if Judge had a bad game and you just walked Soto or vice versa, you could get them out because it wasn't a deep lineup. I think, yes, you've lost Soto, which is a huge loss, but you've replaced him in the aggregate, if you want to kind of quote Moneyball there, which doesn't always work. But Goldschmidt had a bad season last year, down season, could be a ceiling raiser there. But that's an upgrade over Rizzo, in my opinion. You've added Cody Bellinger. That's a nice little addition there. Uh, they don't really have second base figured out yet. I guess that's the one spot that it's unclear. They maybe are putting Jazz Chisholm at second, maybe they're putting him at third. They don't really have that figured out just yet. So that's an area where there's probably still moves to be made. They've been talked about as a potential landing spot for Alex Bregman, but there is some bad blood there from the trash can saga, the buzzer saga from several years ago. He was sort of one of the louder voices saying that it wasn't anything they did wrong. Obviously stuff has come out that that they were doing stuff wrong. So maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. But that's the only area where if they can get a second baseman or a third baseman, vice versa, then you certainly feel like their lineup is deeper. They are not re-signing Gleyber Torres. They might be trading for Luis Arias. That's up in the air. I don't necessarily see that as helping the Yankees all that much, but whatever. If the Yankees trade for him, the Yankees have a pretty smart, pretty savvy front office. You wouldn't expect they'd be trading for somebody that they think is markedly worse. But, my opinion, Luis Arias doesn't really help them for what they're trying to do. I think, yes. So I'm sort of in the group think of the Yankees do feel deeper right now than they did at the end of last year. Are they better overall? That's up for debate. But I certainly don't feel like they're worse, and I do think their pitching is better now. That front three of Cole, uh, Fried, and Heel is really good. So the Yankees right now feel like the favorite in the division to me. Moving on to the Red Sox, and the Red Sox are kind of like the hot team right now. So they finished with a 500 record last year, and it was a team that was well rounded. I think if I look at their MLB standings, they allowed just as many runs as they gave up pretty much. They had a +4 run differential, which they scored 751, they allowed 747, which was the worst in the division. They allowed more runs than the Rays. Well, the Rays allowed the fewest runs in the division, but they allowed more runs than the Blue Jays, who were in last place in the division. The Rays' issue was they couldn't score. But the Red Sox are kind of like the hot team right now, and you can kind of see why. They've had a very active offseason. They have signed Walker Bueller to a 1 year kind of prove it deal. We know he's had injury stuff, has a really good track record historically, but more recently has not been as good, but then looked pretty good in the playoffs in general. So comes on, I think, like 20 some $1 million 1 year deal to kind of prove it. Going to a tough division to do it with the stadium sizes. Yankee Stadium's small, Fenway is small. Orioles are moving left field in a little bit after their experiment there. Toronto tends to play smaller. So it's a tough spot for him to do it in, but clearly he thinks he's got an opportunity to make his money back there, which you can't really blame him for it. He Bueller had a tough time at the end of his run with the Dodgers, just staying on the field. He gets an opportunity to prove that with the Red Sox, high profile. Will certainly be on a lot of national games. He will, be in big matchups. The Red Sox feel like a team that has a chance to go to the postseason. They've got a good manager. The front office has been active this offseason. So you like the Bueller addition. I know some people were talking about him coming to Baltimore on sort of a 1 year prove it deal. Goes to Boston. Certainly a risky addition, but an opportunity to really pay off. Sort of a low risk as long as you don't consider money, but it's a 1 year deal, has a chance to really pay off for them. That's a big addition. Aroldis Chapman's in the bullpen, seemingly replacing kind of Kenley Jansen. I think Jansen is still a free agent, so he could come back. He was pretty good for them last year. So Chapman, let's see, what else did they do? I know they got a big trade we got to talk about, which is Garrett Crochet, another target of the Orioles, supposedly gave up a good amount to get him. He's another risky one. He's a guy that's just got really 1 year of a track record, and it was a really good year. It was a front-loaded year. He was really good sort of prior to the All-Star break. Second half of the year, the White Sox really backed off of him, didn't overload him. He had a lot of like 3 and 4 inning starts versus like 6 and 7 inning starts. That I don't think was because he was breaking down. It was more the Red Sox or the White Sox rather protecting their asset. I don't like to talk about people that way, but that is certainly how they were treating him was we stink. We're not going to be good in 2025. We're probably going to trade this guy. Let's make sure he doesn't get hurt, but at the same time, we can't have him end the season in August with 90 innings. That's going to look bad too. So we got to build him up enough, not get him hurt, and get what we can. And that's exactly what they did. So that's the big addition too is Crochet. So you added Crochet, you added Bueller to that pitching staff that was not great last year. It was okay. It wasn't a total disaster either, but they needed to get better in the rotation. They got better in the rotation. He'll join, Tanner Hawk and Cutter Crawford in that rotation alongside Brian Bayo. It's a decent rotation. I don't necessarily feel like as a biased Orioles fan, does it feel markedly better than what the Orioles have overall? Mm, not really. Obviously Sagano is kind of a mystery for us, but besides that, the Orioles have very well established, like, what this guy is. Whereas I feel like the Red Sox is a much more like higher ceiling but lower floor type of rotation too. That if everything clicks for Bueller, if everything clicks for Crochet, they're going to be really good in the rotation. But it could just as easily not do that. Lucas Giolito's coming back from injury. They expect him all season, but again, he got hurt. Really struggled really since he's left the White Sox in general. Is that going to work out? I don't know. There's a lot of risk there. So I feel like their offense is going to have to carry them again. Can it do that? Is Jaron Duran going to repeat the seasons he's had these last two? He wasn't really like a super high profile prospect. He was good, but not great. And now he's sort of just taken off at the major league level. There's a lot of pressure there. Rafael Devers, of course. So there's a lot there to like about the Red Sox. I think they are a competitive team. I don't feel like they have vaulted ahead of the Orioles the way team people are talking about them. Um, so again, I think they are an exciting team. They're an interesting team. They've certainly reasserted themselves, I think, in the AL East conversation, but I don't think they've catapulted above the Orioles, certainly not above the Yankees, and they still feel sort of like the third best team to me, as I said, a biased Orioles fan. Tampa Bay Rays have had a very Tampa Bay Rays sort of offseason. Um, they haven't done a whole lot all on MLB. I'm sorry, not MLB trade rumors, but on the roster resource, they have five additions. Four of them are minor league contracts, and two of those are two former Orioles, Joey Kribel and Eloy Jimenez. So minor league contracts to them. The only major league deal they've given out is to Danny Jansen, a catcher, 1 year deal. Not a big needle mover there. In terms of trades, not huge additions here. It's all minor league guys or guys with really little major league experience. So not big movement there. I think they're going to hope that they are healthier this year. They had a lot of injuries last year. Shane McClanahan, I think, was out for pretty much the whole season, if I'm remembering correctly. They're going to just hope they're a little healthier, a little luckier than they were last season, when, again, their pitching was fine. They allowed the fewest runs in baseball, and they should be healthier in that regard this year. So you'd think they could be even better than that. But they just didn't really score runs. They scored 604 runs, which is the only team in the AL that was worse than that were the Chicago White Sox. So the offense just wasn't good. And I'm not so sure that they have done a whole lot to rectify that. Now, that said, I think Brandon Lau was hurt for a good amount last year too, so that'll help if he's healthy. But um, they're the Rays. So I'm not going to count them out ever because they are the Rays and they do all kinds of insane things that you don't think are going to work. And even if you're in the AL East, you watch them and or your team plays them a dozen times a year and you still don't recognize half the names in the batting order. Like I'm a person that pays pretty close attention to baseball, but the Rays, their lineups are anonymous most times. They have a guy that is stuck around forever, and then it's surrounded by a bunch of guys that you wouldn't know them from anybody in the street. They might still be making trades. Yandy Diaz could be on the move. They did trade away Jeffrey Springs, Jose Siri, like so the guys that you maybe recognize a little bit more, they're gone. And they haven't really brought in guys that you do recognize that cost money. Like that's just not what the Rays do. So can the Rays bounce back? Sure, they certainly could. They could have guys in the minors that I don't know because I don't know their minor league system. But if you're going it based off of major league track record, they don't feel like they are markedly better, particularly on the offensive side, which was the troublesome part of the game for them last year. So you'd have to hope for them from their perspective that somebody really pops this season, a couple guys pop to vault them back into the playoff conversation. Right now, they don't feel like that kind of a team. And then, of course, there are the Toronto Blue Jays. They have made additions. They've been aggressive this offseason to big names. It has not worked out for them. The only big contract they've really handed out is Jeff Hoffman, reliever who failed a physical with the Orioles, failed a physical with the Braves. The Blue Jays passed him on their physical for lesser dollar amounts than both the Braves and the Orioles were willing to okay. So you have to think that those conversations impacted this in some way, shape, or form. But he's a good pitcher. Was good for the Phillies last year. He does help them if he stays healthy. He'll have a chip on his shoulder facing the Orioles for sure. But that's the only deal they've really gotten done. They have chased Roki Sasaka. He turned them down. They chased Shohei Ohtani last year. They chased Corbin Burns this year. They chased Juan Soto this year. They got none of these guys. And this was a team that struggled last year. They gave up a lot of runs last year. Um, this is a team that needs a lot of things to go right for them. They're talking right now about potentially trading Vlad Guerrero. They added a guy in Miles Straw essentially just to get bonus pool money for Sasaki that didn't come through. So now they have a guy like Miles Straw who has a Gold Glove but has really struggled in other areas of the game. So it's not really an addition there. Andres Jimenez is a nice addition from Cleveland. Is that enough? Doesn't really feel like it, especially if you've got a disgruntled Vlad Guerrero, who, yes, is in a contract year, so you'd expect him to be at least motivated to put up big numbers. But if they struggle, I mean, he was good last year. He was the best first baseman in the AL last year, and it wasn't like it helped them a whole lot. Let's see, anything else to mention with them? Yeah, really not a whole lot. The bullpen will hopefully be better. Yimi Garcia, Jeff Hoffman, Josh Walker, Kevin Gowdy is a minor league contract. So I don't even know why I said him. Yeah, they haven't they've tried. They've really tried, the Blue Jays have, but it hasn't really worked out for them. The rotation is I think got a lot of big names in it, but are they on the back nine? Is Kevin Gossman past his prime? Is Jose Barrios past his prime? I think he was pretty good last year, but still it's like they just don't have those guys right now. So it's tough to see. If I look at their lineup right now, let's take a look. George Springer, older. Bo Bichette, really good, or historically good, but again, entering his contract year. Vlad Guerrero entering his contract year. They got Will Wagner penciled in at DH, Alejandro Kirk at catcher, Andres Jimenez at second base. That's a good addition. A guy named Ernie Clement at third base, Nathan Lukes in center, Joey Loperfido in left field. It's just they don't have a lot of the dudes there that you can say, like, yeah, this guy can get it done. And then in the rotation, Gossman, Barrios, Bowden Francis, Chris Bassett, Yariel Rodriguez. I think you feel like Gossman, Barrios, and Bassett are at least dependable. Is Alek Manoah like still in the conversation? Maybe. Who knows? That's a weird one. Like things just haven't really panned out for them since like that golden age of young players that you really thought was going to catapult them. It just hasn't happened. And this offseason certainly doesn't feel like it has, you know, propelled them to the point of competing with the Yankees, who I think we know are good, the Orioles, who I feel like we know the Orioles are good, the Red Sox, who were competitive last year, feel better right now. Like those are three teams that should flirt with 90 wins or more. Um, the Rays, who are the Rays, and on paper always seem underwhelming and then get on the baseball field and can compete with anybody in the league. The Blue Jays feel still like that fifth team. And like I said, there's still a month until spring training. There's, a month and a half after that between spring training starting and the regular season starting. There's a lot of time for moves to happen. And the moves that people are talking about with the Blue Jays at this point, after they've missed out on so many guys, are negative. They are trading guys away. They are trading a Vlad Guerrero, most notably. People have talked about them connected to the Mets with that because the Mets might not end up with Pete Alonso. Could they maybe trade for Vlad Guerrero and then sign him to an extension, something like that? So that's sort of the lay of the land there. So where do things stand in the AL East after that? Does it feel like a big shift in power? Have the power dynamics changed at all from where things ended last year with the Yankees in first, Orioles in second, Red Sox third, Rays fourth, and Blue Jays fifth? It doesn't feel like this offseason has changed that too much. I think a lot of the talk right now is that the Red Sox could potentially vault the Orioles, but then the Red Sox still don't feel like a contender with the Yankees. The Yankees, people think, have maybe gotten better as a team. They have obviously not replaced Juan Soto in any one player, but maybe they've deepened their roster and can allow themselves to improve their defense, their speed. Their pitching feels better. Can the Yankees challenge for 100 wins? Like that seems like the storylines. And then at the bottom of the division, Rays and Blue Jays. The Rays are sort of anonymous as always. That could be really good, really bad for them. And the Blue Jays haven't really changed a lot. And with a lot of their better players, not Guerrero or Bichette, but their pitching staff is just getting older. That doesn't necessarily mean better. So the Blue Jays could get even worse. Yeah, I mean, I think that feels about right. I think the Yankees are really good, but what I said last year was that it was a Soto and a Judge offense. And when you figured that out, you could beat the rest of the team. They don't have Soto anymore. And yes, they've replaced him in an interesting way that does make them deeper, but it doesn't, to me, make them scarier. Cody Bellinger is a good player. He's a flawed player. Paul Goldschmidt is older and was not great for the Cardinals last year, which are a model organization. How's he going to do in the bright lights of New York City? It's not Arizona, it's not St. Louis. This is a different ball game, and I know that's a cliche to talk about New York that way, but it certainly seems like the case, especially with the Yankees. They've had players flame out that do well other places time and time again. Um, Maybe Goldschmidt can do that. He's a pro. He's been in the league for 15 years or whatever, but you never know until you know. So I don't necessarily feel like the Yankees have really separated themselves all that much from the Orioles and the Red Sox. And yes, the Red Sox do feel better on paper with the pitching. And if their pitching does take a step forward, that does get them closer to the Orioles. But what I will say about the Orioles is I feel like a lot of these teams prep themselves for opening day to be not at 100% of like their ability for the entire year, but they go like, we want to put our best foot forward on opening day. The Orioles, to me, never position themselves like that under Elias, especially, these last 2, 3 years where they've been good. It is always, let's get ourselves 70% of the way there by opening day. Let's hold some stuff back. Let's keep a Basayo at AAA. Let's not overextend ourselves for this free agent because guess what? The trade deadline comes. We can get this guy for, 10 cents on the dollar compared to what we can get him right now. That's how Elias tends to treat these things. Also, they're getting a draft pick for Burns. They're gonna get a draft pick for Santander if and when he signs, regardless of how much he signs for. But if he signs for more than $50 million, they'll get a high draft pick between round one and the competitive balance A pick. The Orioles will end up with 3, 4 picks in the top 40. Then they're gonna get a brand new draft class right before the trade deadline. And then Elias can say, look, we just got these four dudes that I'm hyped up on about. Now we don't need this guy and this guy from last year's draft class or this guy and that guy from 2 years ago. Not that he views it that way, but like we know what these guys are now after having a year or two of data. We can trade these guys off because we feel confident about what we have now coming in. That feels like what they're gonna do. And the Orioles don't have their ace right now, but the offense feels pretty good. The defense feels pretty good. The bullpen I feel confident in with Bautista coming back. They added Kittredge. That means that's lowering the responsibilities of Cano and Dominguez. The Orioles feel pretty well rounded right now. They're going for depth. They're going to withstand the attrition. That's the goal anyway. And then they can strike in July when they see what the market has. Maybe the Padres fall off, they can go get Cease. Um, Maybe the Marlins fall apart, they can go get a guy there. Maybe the Mariners fall apart, they can go get a guy there. The Orioles are building themselves to be competitive into the summer, giving themselves depth, giving themselves the ability to go to that next man up mentality. And a lot of other teams, to me, aren't really built that way. Um, so I think that's where the Orioles are right now is to be competitive. Don't expect them to sprint off the starting line and get out to a 10-game lead, but expect them to lay in wait because that sort of reflects how their GM approaches things. So that's kind of how I feel right now. I think the Orioles are going to contend for the division crown again. As I say, there's a month until spring training. Then from when spring training starts, there's a month and a half until the season starts. There's a lot of time for things to happen. But right now, where things stand, the Orioles feel like they are right there in the conversation with the Yankees for the division. They are not as top heavy as the Yankees. They do feel a little bit deeper than the Yankees. I think the offense can go toe to toe with the Yankees. And as good of an offseason as I feel like the Red Sox have had, they also had a lot of room to make up. They were 10 games worse than the Orioles last year. Um, did they get 10 games better? Did the Orioles get 10 games worse? Is there some middle ground there? I don't feel like that's happened. So I feel good about the Orioles offseason. Certainly, they didn't have the huge hits so far that we would have wanted, but I do feel like they have added depth and they have given themselves a better opportunity to withstand the attrition that comes with a 162 game season that they withstood that decently last year, but I think they got hit in the pitching department a lot harder than they expected to in that regard. They didn't expect to have to be relying on Cade Povich for a ton of starts, Albert Suarez for a ton of starts. They got a little bit lucky that things went as well as they did in that regard. They feel like this year they've beefed up a little bit and they're a little bit more ready for that to hit them this time. So But that's how I feel about the situation. You let me know how things have gone in the offseason for the various AL East teams. Leave a comment on YouTube. I think you can leave a comment on Spotify now. You can also email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com, or on social media on X or Blue Sky at the Warehouse Pod. Give us your opinions of how the AL East has gone this offseason. Did the Orioles get much better? Did the other teams get much better? Do you think the Orioles are going to win the AL East? Is it going to be a disappointing season? I know we've got time still in the offseason, but this felt like a good point to stop, reflect on the last 3 months, and prognosticate a little bit, if I can get the words out, on what we have ahead of us. So that's all I've got for this episode. Um, Please subscribe to us if you have not already on your various podcast apps, and give us a follow on social media. And again, support our team here, Believe Podcast Network, Bet Online. If you like those things, go check them out. They've helped us out a lot this year. And yeah, that's really all I have got for this episode. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. See you.